Thank you very much, and thank you, youngster, for that very kind introduction, and thank you, Aaron, for moving forward for me. So, I have this presentation, and it's based on an academic publication that I did a couple years ago. They got a fair bit of uptake, so I was very pleased with that. But listening to the presentation this morning, I've decided to make a few other remarks and to make some remarks that I hope are more appropriate to the actual seminar that's being conducted here. So for one thing, let me tell you this. Not a lot of work has been written in the African American tradition, but there are some works that really you should take a look at. So if you got a pen and a piece of paper, write this down. Not in teaching mode, right? Okay. And this is something I did. I did a seminar, a graduate seminar on hope at the University of Oklahoma, which is where I was at the last year. And we did this book, which was very interesting. And it is called, let me see if I can get the title and subtitle correct. But it's The Melancholy of Hope, Hope draped in black. It's either, it could be the other way around. So I apologize for that. And it's The Melancholy of Hope, Hope draped in black. And it is about hope in the African American tradition. It is written by a religious studies scholar, Professor Joseph R. Winters. So this is a book that I highly recommend to you. It's the only full-length treatment of hope that I know about. I have just now discovered on Amazon.com that there is something else on hope in the African American tradition in the educational context. But there is so little on hope. One of the articles in the book on hope that I'm editing is by my dear friend Lewis Gordon at the University of Connecticut, who is a very influential scholar of in the African American philosophical tradition. And he has written a paper challenging the notion that hope is appropriate for African Americans. So there's really an interesting dialectic. You also may or may not be aware that another scholar named Calvin Warren has written on Black nihilism. Okay, so that would be an opposite of hope. There's also Afro-pessimism that is by Frank Wilderson. And then how many of you know about Afrofuturism? Great science fiction, right? Great science fiction. So none of that is in this talk, for which I apologize, but I'm hoping that along the way, you can raise some very pertinent questions, okay? Because I think this could be sort of useful for you. So, there are some introductory remarks, which I haven't given yet. Those were my pre-introductory remarks, okay? And then there's what is hope, warriors and carers, hope is democratic civic virtue, and theorizing hope, a modified pragmatism. So all of this gets kind of down and dirty, you might say, with the philosophy. And we might not get as down and dirty as I have done here. We're going to get into what is important for you, okay? So now, Aaron, hit it. Thank you. So here's the political background. There are populist currents around the globe, right? And if you know about populism, you know that Trump did this sort of thing, right? And what Trump did, in my opinion, was play on the fears of rural whites and other whites who feel that they have been marginalized. And why anybody would believe that Trump is interested in anybody other than himself is beyond me. But he still has quite a following. I read in the New York Times yesterday that Biden and Trump will be in a very tight race. I also read that Trump was indicted, right, for trying to overturn the result of the 2020 election. So we live in complicated times. Okay, so the legacy of Trump that continues is polarization in the United States. And what Trump did, in my opinion, was to legitimize racism. Right, to let that cat out of the bag again. And so along the way here, as I was driving, I drove from Kansas and I drove through some parts of rural Arkansas. I saw a couple of Confederate flags, and I kind of like, dude, you lost. But they don't get that, right? They don't get it. So we are still in this situation that is very complicated and very, I think, dangerous for Black people today. Okay. Democracy, I believe, is imperiled, not just here, but in other parts of the globe. Because we have people challenging elections, we have election deniers, we have all kinds of things that make our system of government weaker, you might say, unless we stand up and push back. So here's a caveat, okay? What I'm concerned about in this talk is hope as a democratic civic virtue, right? And by that I mean a virtue that is useful in democracies and specific to democratic political systems. Hope could be a virtue, a civic virtue in other forms of political system, maybe monarchies or forms of socialism. And I'm leaving that aside. I think if hope is present in fascist governments, I'm sure that there are people who hope that fascist government will prevail. That's not an issue. For reasons having to do with the moral problems of fascism. So are we good so far? Still with me? Okay, now, just raise your hand or yell out nicely if you have a question. Okay, so what is hope? So I've done a lot of thinking about this. There's a large literature. It's a huge literature on hope. As I said, not so much in the African American tradition, but I'm hoping that that changes soon. Okay, so the way I carve up this landscape is that I think that there are what's called agency theories and receptivity theories. So agency theories foreground a person's ability to act. Hence they're called agency. You are an agent, you are capable of action. So agency theories place the agent's ability to act at the center of a theory of hope. Receptivity theories, by contrast, include agency, but they foreground something else. They foreground what you might call patient listening, patient expectation, or something on that order. So they're a little different and less obvious, you might say, less obvious to grasp. Both of those theories, but especially the agency theories, incorporate what I've called the bare bones model of hope. And so this is the basis, right? Hope is the desire for an outcome and the belief that it's possible to attain. And there is an analytic philosopher named J.P. Day who wrote about that in a perfectly ghastly paper that he wrote in 1969. I say this because it's one of the most horrible things you'll ever have to read. And I assigned it to my graduate students, and then I decided, no, I can't do this. And one of them actually read it by mistake, and she was like traumatized. So anyway, you got J.P. Day stuff, but you also find basically that model enriched and enhanced in various ways in theorists as different as, say, Thomas Aquinas, Thomas Hobbes, the contemporary philosopher Victoria McGeer, the contemporary philosopher Margaret Walker, and the contemporary but now deceased psychologist C.R. Snyder. Okay. So there are enhancements of this belief desire model. So the agency theorists think that hope can enhance effective agency, and it has a motivational role in helping to achieve goals. Now, I think we saw this at the end of our discussion in the last session, right? How do you maintain hope, right? Hope is what energizes people. And Aaron brought up the motivational role of anger. Okay, you get angry, right? You get mad, and then you're going to act for in terms of for hope, for anything. Like I hope for individual racism, and by God, I'm going to get it. I'm going to go out and vote, right? We had a discussion at the end of the last session. Jaquela, is that your name? Good. We had a discussion about that some young people don't interested in voting. Well, you better be interested in voting, and you better run for political office. because that's how you will get the power to make change. So I know, this is a little bit of an digression, but I know Senator Tammy Baldwin, first out lesbian senator ever from the state of Wisconsin. And she once said, if you can't change hearts and minds, change faces. Right? So if your elected officials aren't doing what you want them to, show them the door and get in there and do it yourself. Okay, so now hope is what I call a game changer, right? By that I mean, if you hope for an outcome, you can do any number of things to make it come about, right? So how many of you hope, well, you're students, right? You guys students, many of you? Okay, so, all right, do you take exams? Okay, what do you hope for in an exam? You get an A, right? You hope for an A. How do you do that? You study, right? What if you get a bad grade on your first exam? What do? You cry. Okay. You study hard. You cry. You study hard. After you cry, what do? You what? You take a nap. I'll let you take a nap. This is good. Work with me. You take a nap. You study harder, right? Eventually you study harder. You talk to your professor, you figure out what you did wrong, right? You say to yourself, after you take that nap, you get up and you say to yourself, I can fix this. And here's how, right? Hope is a game changer, right? It means that there are things in you that you can change to achieve your goals, right? Okay, so I didn't study as hard as I should have. I went out to that party. Not again. No, not again. Okay. So that's how we learn, right? And that's how we can have hope. Now, have you ever been in a discipline that it's just not right for you? You had a major that's not right for you? I was actually a chemistry major. Somebody was majoring in chemistry. That's it. I thought, when you said that, I thought, oh my God. Okay. You know, I found out I am not good at chemistry. So I decided I would be in philosophy. And which I'm sort of good at, okay? So, you know, what I did was I shifted, I changed my goal, right? I didn't just drop out of school, oh God, it's not for me, you know, I'm gonna do something, I'm gonna be a bartender. Oh yeah, no. I just, you know, you gotta change your goal sometimes. So when we get to Snyder, we're gonna see that Snyder has this notion of high hopers and low hopers, right? So high hopers have cognitive flexibility. They can change their goals. What did we see this morning in terms of the civil rights movement that showed that people had high hope? Pardon? Somebody has a microphone, I think.
I said the kids smiling.
Smiling?
Yes, while they were protesting.
Smiling while they were protesting. Let's go on. Let's come on now. More. What are we seeing? What are we seeing? You're gonna get exercise. It's good.
I think we find hope when we see the parents willing to let their kids protest. They
Right.
hoping that.
Right, we see a variety of tactics, okay? So we see the lunch counter first, we saw that. And then we saw, well, there weren't that many people involved in the lunch counter sit-ins, right? And then we had the adults marching, so that's another tactic, right? And then we had the children marching. And that was a very, very difficult decision. But what that meant was that the civil rights leaders did not give up hope on ending segregation in Birmingham. But they changed their tactics. They were flexible enough to change their tactics. They were high hopers. If they had been low hopers, what would have happened is after that first lunch counter sit-in, they would have just given up the game. But that did not happen. Y'all with me? Y'all see the point here? Excellent. Good. Okay, so Margaret Walker thinks that hope is not simply a belief desire complex, but an emotional attitude consisting of a variety of hope phenomena, such as plans, imaginings, and expectations. I want to pause for a moment to ask about the role of imagination, which I think is crucial. What do you imagine for yourself for the future?
Success, I'm about to.
What's that?
Success,
What does it look like?
achieving goals.
Be more specific.
Working in the field that I'm going to college.
Working in the field that I'm going to college for. This young lady back there has her hand up too.
I want to be a PR major, but I basically want to work in crisis management, and my goal is to open my own crisis firm and watch CVC.
Oh, good.
Political campaigns.
Great. So, and you want to work in what?
I'm a pre-nursing student.
Pre-nursing.
I want to be a pediatric.
Pediatric nurse. Excellent. How about you?
Child psychologist.
Child psychologist. Okay, so we have a variety of different life plans, career goals, right? Can you imagine yourself doing that work? You project yourself into that future. You imagine yourself doing it. Okay, what do you imagine for Black people as a whole? What do you imagine for African Americans? We were talking about schools, right? We were talking about schools being underfunded in Black neighborhoods. Public schools are underfunded because they are based on property taxes. So rich white suburbs are going to get more money for their schools than poor Black neighborhoods. Can you imagine a different system? Can you imagine it? That's where hope starts. It starts in imagining a better future, right? You imagine that you want high quality education for all, and then you figure out how to get there, right? How do we get there? You imagine being a child psychologist. You imagine being a pediatric nurse. You imagine a firm in Washington, D.C. Then step by step, how are you going to get there? That is how the agency theory of hope works. You have that goal, but you imagine it for yourself or for the people you care about. Y'all with me? Questions? Are we good? Okay, next point. Hope is a disposition. Patrick Shea wrote about the virtue of hopefulness, which is an entrenched character state or disposition of energetic openness to future possibilities, right? There is a possible future that you can influence, an energetic openness, right? Now, that doesn't mean that every day you're going to bounce out of bed and say, oh yeah, okay, here I am, ready to do my nursing exam. Okay? Here I am, oh yeah. Every day you might need a breather, right? But the long-term thing, the long-term base of your life is this disposition to be hopeful. Y'all with me? Okay. Aquinas, hope is a passion and a theological virtue. It is an intermediate state between the vices of presumption and despair. Now, despair is easy, right? Despair is, I don't think I can do this. This will never happen. Presumption is thinking it's in the bag. All right? Thinking it's already a done deal. And what the perils of presumption are, is that you cannot work as hard as you have to actually achieve the goal, right? You're sort of thinking, oh yeah, I got this. And then you find out on that exam, not so much, right? So you always have to be prepared to do a lot of work to achieve your goals. Okay. Hopes. Now, specific hopes can, but need not arise from a hopeful disposition. They can be general or specific about things large or small, right? So some days I hope that I won't fall down. You know, I just hope because I'm kind of close. And I'm thinking, you know, if I fall down in front of my class, well, they'll love it, but I might not. So this is kind of a small hope. Or you might hope that your basketball team wins the game or whatever, right? Or you might have a hope that is more momentous for you. And you might hope for a good biopsy outcome, right? But those are specific hopes to you. There's a specific object of that hope. But some of our hopes outstrip our capacities as agents. When you hope for equality in school funding, that raises the level of schools in African American neighborhoods. This is something that you are not going to be able to achieve by yourself. Okay, that's going to require a lot of collective action. That's going to require a change in government policy. That's a big one. That's a big deal. That doesn't mean you shouldn't have it. What it means is that you have to realize it's not gonna happen overnight. And it's gonna require a lot of work. But the civil rights movement required a lot of work. And now everybody can vote, right? Everybody who is eligible can vote. People can register to vote, Black people can register to vote without having to lose their jobs or their houses and be threatened. Okay. Now, receptivity theories of hope are kind of different, and they provide large theoretical frameworks and broad frameworks within which individual agency and hope's effects on it are theorized and contextualized. Next one. Come on, Aaron, keep up.
Sorry.
Okay.
I hope I get it.
You're good, you're okay, we'll work on this. So here's some examples of receptivity theories. They include those of the French Christian existentialist Gabriel Marcel, who wrote in 1978, the Easterman Marxist Ernst Bloch, who wrote in 1986, or was published in 1986, and the conception of hope attributed to the Crow tribe by Jonathan Lear in his book Radical Hope. I'm going to discuss each of these a little bit. Now, Jacqueline said earlier that we find joy in the Bible, right? And we might find hope in the Bible too. Thank
Sorry,
you.
I skipped
No, you're good, you're good. If you got ahead of the game here.
Yeah, sorry.
I'll try to keep up. So, the thing is, for Marcel, who was a Christian, hope occurs most profoundly in situations of captivity in which our capacities for agency are trammeled. So we patiently await God to erupt into the world. Now that erupt word is a little bit specific, right? You have wisdom teeth? Oh, you're lucky. Okay, well, one of them, when they come out, it hurts, that's an eruption, okay? That's not like ERUPT, it's a specific word. But anyway, we await God to come into the world, okay? And hope involves receptivity to God's intervention. So basically, you're in a situation in which you don't know what to do. And you are patiently waiting for the word of God to come to you and give you guidance. Who can relate this to the civil rights movement? Yes, I saw a movement, it's like a lottery, it's like an auction. Okay. Hang on, Susan. Okay.
We were talking about the children's movement, and I feel like Dr. King being a reverend, he was pacing back and forth with young God's answer to see if he truly wanted these kids to be out in March. And a lot of times they would be up at churches, like the kids, they're meeting up at the 16th Baptist Church. And I know they were saying that Dr. King was also having a lot of reservations about just the decisions he was making in general.
Well, it's not always going to be clear. I mean, the word of God is not always going to be clear, right? I mean, sometimes you gotta miss silence. And sometimes, you know, there are different answers that might be given, yes.
I think one of the things we can look at is when, after the bombing at the 16th Baptist Church, and the poor little girls dying, you see Diane Nash, almost imprisoned by the bomb, needing to murder.
Yeah.
And, she's imprisoned by these thoughts, and she has the, almost eruption, the idea of like, this is the time that we need. Murder isn't gonna get us where we need to get going. This is the time that we move forward.
Right, right. So, you know, you can take a lot of time. You can take a lot of time and a lot of deliberation to find out the right thing to do. And that's okay. That's all right. We live in a society in which we've got to do things right, you know, just right now, this minute. I mean, my phone goes off, my text message goes off. Stop, right? Lear has sort of a similar view that he attributes to the Crow Chief Plenty Crew. Okay, so the book is called Radical Hope. And this is the idea that when Plenty Crew was faced with domination by US forces in the West, in the American West, and the destruction of the traditional Crow way of life, he waited for signs from the chickadee person. That was part of his spirituality, part of the tribe spirituality, right? About how to preserve a recognizably Crow form of life in the future. And so the Crow were confronted with possibilities for living that they couldn't really conceptualize. I mean, they had always lived on the plains, right? They had roamed freely. Western domination involved parceling out farmland. Well, that was foreign to them. That was an alien concept. And sometimes, we don't know what's going to happen. We can't imagine it. So we have to kind of wait for guidance. This notion of radical hope has been applied in the context of climate change today. We are facing a crisis in terms of what we are doing to the planet and the climate. We might not be able to envision how things are going to unfold in the future. Right? We are now experiencing a series of severe weather events. So how can we get through this? Well, we might not be able to see the end goal, right? So earlier I said, you need to imagine where you want to be. Radical hope occurs when we can't do that. Okay, that's where radical hope occurs. And it happened with the Crow, and it's happening now with climate change. We can still have hope, but it's much harder. Y'all with me? Questions? Okay, next slide. So Bloch was an interesting dude. Okay, he wrote these 3 volumes called Principles of Hope. Truly horrific in terms of the prose style. I could barely get through one of them. But he had what was called warm stream Marxism. So there's cold stream Marxism and warm stream Marxism. Cold stream Marxism was based on basically economic theory, economic facts. Warm stream Marxism moved us into literature, cultural things like arts. And for that reason, it was a little suspect because, that was all influenced by capitalism, right? And he was East German, right? So hope for Bloch is a kind of deep-seated hunger that moves us toward what he called the noch nicht, not yet, okay? So it moves us toward the ideal of a classless communist state, even though we can see it only darkly because of the accretions of capitalism, right? These accretions being, we're bombarded with capitalism, right? By this, by that, by the other thing. It's everywhere. It's just everywhere, right? And this really can distort our minds. So they were trying to think about what classless society would look like. And of course, you can't really envision that when you're being bombarded all the time. But you might also think, what would a society of racial equality look like? What would that look like in the United States? And I don't think we know. We don't know because we are still struggling with the accretions of racism. Okay, racism is, of course, still here. I don't need to tell you that, right? You know that. So we don't know what that would look like yet. We don't know. But still, we could move forward toward it. The question is how. The question is how. And then we kind of, in terms of being hopeful, when we've got these goals that are so difficult to even visualize, we kind of have to stumble forward, right? So we're not always going to be spot on. We're going to make mistakes. That's okay. What's not okay to me is to give up. Okay, you do need a breather. You do need to take a break, as I said earlier. But what is interesting to me, you're good, go ahead. Good. Thank you. Is that this Marxist theory provides us with what I call a theory of political consciousness. So a lot has been written in the Marxist tradition about political consciousness, not so much in political liberalism, which is something that I hope to rectify someday. That means I want to write about it. Okay, but what was I going to say? Excuse me. What did I just say?
Political consciousness.
Yeah, I think it's do this every thought. What happens to age? Okay. And you're not there yet. Okay, but the idea here is, what does it mean? What kind of consciousness do we have? what do we think about politics? Do we think we can change it or not? And if we do think we can change the world we live in through political activism, what forms can that take? What forms will it take, right? So that's what we gotta think about. And what is it that you have ingested? What have you gotten through osmosis in your minds about your roles as citizens and as people who can and should be actively influencing the world around you, right, through politics? Anybody want to answer that question? Not purely rhetorical. Yes. I know you're not raising your hand, you're scratching your head.
You got called on.
She didn't have it now. Like one of my students in my class is just trying to get one.
Wait, say the question.
Okay. What was the question? Oh, yeah, they say that a lot too. What do you think? What have you kind of internalized about what you can do as a citizen to change society?
I also one thing I internalized as a citizen to change society, you back to your community and you mentors the young community, because growing up, I had mentors and I have my mentors and mentors I have and the mentors I have now. Only where I am. So I would say give back to the young community and reporting to them the way that my mentors supporting.
Good, good. So you have models, you have role models. Okay, excellent. Anyone else? You know what's easy to internalize today? You know what I find when students internalize it? We can't do anything. Right? We cannot do anything to change society. And that's false. It is absolutely false, right? You can do a lot. It takes a little creativity, but you can do a lot. Yeah. Do you have a question?
No, I just wanted to comment. My students often tell me that they don't think they're voting models.
Mhm.
And then we spend the rest of that class period talking about why that's not true.
Yeah. Your vote does matter. All the professors have decided they're gonna, thank you.
I'll add a little bit, so,
Okay.
Here's my goal as when I was in school, I always wanted to go back to my undergraduate institution and teach. It just was so inspirational to me, but one of my professors always told me, he was like, you may not ever go back to your hometown or home school, but you can certainly find communities that are similar that you can contribute to. And, one of my dream goals now, since I became a slight political junkie during the last Olympics, I want to one day I plan to run for the local board of education. All politics are local.
Okay, all right then. So these receptivity theories provide larger frameworks that can contextualize specific hopes. Okay. All right, so writing in different contexts. This is Hirokazu Miyazaki, and he is an anthropologist. And he has written that hope suggests a willingness to embrace uncertainty and also serves as a concrete method for keeping knowledge moving in conditions of uncertainty. So why does hope embrace uncertainty? No professors. Sorry.
He's a sophomore.
Oh, you're a sophomore.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I have 3 hands, 1, 2, and 3.
You said why does hope
Embrace uncertainty.
embrace uncertainty?
Yeah.
I feel like it's because of our imaginative aspects. You can, like you said, picture. Once you picture yourself there, you can place yourself there. And a lot of people's situations are dire, so I feel like it kind of leads into this association, being able to. The human mentality wants to keep us happy. So to do that in certain conditions, we're going to imagine a better future, a better situation.
Absolutely right, good. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, sorry, I have reduced you to your roles.
Piggybacking off what she said about the imaginative aspects, I think that, hope plays with uncertainty because it's like, well, what if it, people are like, well, what if it doesn't work out? There's all the people who action, but it's like keeping that thought that what if it does work out? What is the bigger picture? If it does work out, what kind of accomplish?
Exactly. What if it does work out? So hope is about that which is not yet settled. It isn't settled. It isn't finished. Go ahead.
Right, I feel a little late saying this now, but by definition, hope means changing things, or the desire to change things, and things, as said, may not work out quite that way. Maybe you'll have beneficial effects that you weren't even foreseeing,
Right.
but you cannot, because you cannot fully predict the future, you're gonna have to embrace a certain measure of uncertainty when you try to change, try to affect change, sorry.
Exactly. Yes. Thank you. Good comments. Great comments. Anything else? Anybody else? Okay.
Can professor say something? So, just one thing that I'm going back to your earlier point about despair and presumption, right? Despair is an attitude of certainty.
Yeah.
It certainly will not happen.
Right.
Presumption is an attitude of certainty as well, right?
Yeah.
It certainly will happen. Hope is neither of those things, right? It has to embrace uncertainty because you don't have that fixity of mindset that's both with despair and presumption.
Exactly. That cold hard logic. Exactly. Very good. Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so here's the. Oh, I'm sorry. You want to say something else? Go for it. Don't let it shut you down.
Yeah, so
It's funny how we're talking about this because, I took a class with Professor Paul last semester.
I'm sorry.
And we talked about, I can't think of it right now, but it's like when something's too extreme or when something's too little, you gotta find that.
Excess and efficiency.
That's it. And like, I think that's what we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
because That's pretty perfect logical.
That's right. That's right. That's why hope is virtue. It's this intermediate state between two extremes. This young, I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
Just Katie.
Okay. All right.
I would say hope is a very strong working person in a democratic society because, my sister Kavita, her and her organization just went to the Supreme Court to speak on a case and it was just passed to reduce the green map. And she was very much terrified to go and speak to the Supreme Court and they were very much, I would say they had a lot of hope to go up there and be like, yeah, we're gonna see the Supreme Court say that this redistricting map was, pretty much racial. And then, it's funny because when she found out they won, that's in their story. And she looked up at the TV and she was like, she was very shocked because she was like, she didn't expect it. Even though they had hope, she didn't expect the Supreme Court to actually be on their side.
Good. Thank you. Okay. All right. Yeah. One more down here. Yeah. Yeah. Come on, just set it
I think hope is a willingness to give yourself away to uncertainty as well. It's such a willingness to put yourself to the will of the situation. And it really does go hand in hand with uncertainty, but it's such a willingness to kind of go with the tide.
Yeah. Thank you. You kind of gotta go with the flow. It requires some flexibility. Yeah. Anybody else? Okay, well, here's the first conception of hope as a democratic civic virtue. It's the entrenched disposition of openness to the political possibilities that democratic government can provide. It includes the desire to promote or attain the legitimate ends of democracy and the belief that such ends are possible. So to be a democratic civic virtue, the disposition of hope must include a commitment to democracy and democratic processes. And hope is fully theorized and contextualized within specific political traditions, right? And by specific, I mean pretty darn specific, right? You can get, I'm thinking about the United States here, but we can get even more local, as Quinn, and I cannot remember your last name, thank you, said, okay? Which function as the grounds for receptivity to hope and inspiration for hope motivated agency. So here's something I want. I'm kind of going to skip through a fair bit of this, but I looked at this book by Gossen Paga, And it was written in 2003, it's called Against Paranoid Nationalism. And it was written about John Howard's Australia. And at that time, Australia was not good on immigrants. They were very bad. And so what Haga, who is a Lebanese Australian theorist, thought was that we can create nations of warriors. That is, with the WORRIERS or carers. Okay, and so we see this in our nation today. So warriors are people who want to close borders, right? They don't want immigrants to come into the United States. There are people who want to gerrymander voting districts because they want to retain power, right? They can't share, they can't be open. They think that there is limited resources, so they don't want equality for schools, for school funding, right? Because they want to maintain power and control. Now, carers, by contrast, are more open. They are able to allow other people to share benefits, right? They are stronger, they're more secure, right? They're not threatened. And a condition for creating carers is the distribution of societal hope. Okay, that's one of its key theses, right? That when we make hope available to people, we are creating stronger, more secure individuals. I want to add to that if you give people hope, you have to enable them actually to achieve their goals, right? So if I say to you, you got to go vote because that makes a difference. And you vote X number of times, it doesn't make a difference. You're going to become embittered. If I say to you, you got to grow up and run for office, right? You got to do that to change things. And there are no educational opportunities to enable you to do that. You will become bitter. So I am all for governments and societies distributing hope and saying, look, you should have goals and try to achieve them. You should hope to get there. But I am also saying that along with that, you got to create the opportunities and the systems and structures that will make it happen. Okay. If not, you're a big fat phony, right? You are a fraud. Okay. You know with me? Okay. Now, okay, we got warriors, we got carers, we've seen that. Okay. And so here the thing is, in the US, we live in this fractured and polarized political landscape. So, I went through some fairly impoverished areas of Arkansas on my way here. And I saw a trailer park with a big old Confederate flag. I mean, a huge Confederate flag hanging from it. And I thought, oh God, let's get out before they get their Klan outfits on and start prancing around. These guys, they are warriors because they're on the bottom end of the stick here. And I'm betting they vote. I'm betting these people go out and vote for their local racist candidate. So when your friends say my vote doesn't matter, you say, oh yes, it does. Oh yes, it does. I had another thought, but might have sort of erased by the vision of the Klan. But in the middle of all this, what could hope as a democratic civic virtue look like? That's the question. Oh my gosh. So look at how it's a nice little skydiving thing, but you can't see the front. Don't worry about that. So here's this case. Amanda LaShaw is a sociologist. So in 2008, parents in Oakland, California decided they wanted better schools for their kids. And these parents were, guess what? Latinx and Black. Hello. And what did they do? Well, they got organized. There were some community organizers helping them. And they got together and they got, what was it? A $350 million, was it million? Yeah, $1 million bond from Oakland to improve the schools, and then a large donation from the Gates Foundation. Okay, so this was, in my view, now let's try to diagnose it that way. Look at that typo. Democratic. This is hope is democratic civic virtue, right? Nobody in that group could have done it alone. Collectively, they did it. Collectively, they organized and they did it, and they got better schools for their kids. Now, next slide, please. Motivations. Here's the thing. Must the motivation always be a pure love of democracy? Well, I don't think so, right? But it's got to have a commitment to democracy, because these parents did not say, I'm going to do this because I love democracy. Right? They said, I'm going to do this because I want my kids to get a good education. And that's legitimate. It is consistent with democratic political processes and with the goals of democracy. Now, if they had tried to get better schools by bribing school board officials, no. Then they don't have hope as democratic civic virtue. If they had tried to do this, maybe by redirecting money from disabled children's programs, that too would probably have been wrong. Problematic, right? But what they did was they went out, they got more money from different sources to improve their schools. Okay, completely consistent with hope as democratic civic virtue. So what I'm suggesting is that, there could be some other motives other than pure love of democracy that motivates hope as democratic civic virtue. You know what I mean? Certainly the civil rights people, had a variety of motives, right? I mean, it could be they worked within the democratic process, they had faith in it, okay? But they also wanted to stop violence, stop the segregation, stop all these kinds of horrible things that were happening at the time. Ensure voting rights, for example. And I've got some philosophy in there in case you're interested, about how this fits in with, other historical views and philosophy. I say this, of course, because we all know that this is the philosophy you learned at your mother's feet. All right, now, purity and pure virtue, I just saw that, I just went over that, so we're good. Amendment to the initial conception. So hope is democratic virtue, blah, blah, blah. You can read that, but it includes the motivational clause here. It includes the idea that we can have different kinds of interests in addition to the interest in promoting democracy and the commitment to democracy. Okay, now theorizing hope. Here's where it gets interesting. All right, I don't know. I regard Joe Winters' book, The Melancholy of Hope, as a large attempt to theorize hope in the context of the African American tradition. Now, some of that is political, and some of it draws on art and literature and jazz and other things, right? Because there's very complicated African American culture in this society. And he uses quite a bit of it, not all of it, but quite a bit of it. And so he contextualizes hope in that context, right? That, people go to different towns. There's a northern migration, right? Some people go up to Detroit. Why do they do this? Is hope involved? The answer is yes, by the way. Okay. Hope is involved, hope for a better life. So there are all kinds of places at which hope might come into play, but it's never really rosy, right? That's why hope red and black, right? And it isn't rosy because of the history of oppression, right? If you have a history of oppression, of the people brought over here, stolen from their families and brought over in chains, your vision of hope is going to be darker and a lot less optimistic than these other visions, which are basically white, right? So, how should we do this? Well, I came up with something called a modified pragmatist. Okay, the pragmatist tradition in philosophy goes back to people like Peirce and James and Dewey, but I went to Walt Whitman. How many of you know who Walt Whitman was? Poet, right? A poet. And he wrote, let's forget that. Thanks. Okay, he wrote Song of Myself in 1855, and Song of Myself is this great poem that identifies with all of the people of America. Okay, and that was written before the Civil War. Next slide. So then the Civil War comes, right? So the Civil War was tremendously traumatic. And after that, he wrote Democratic Dissidents in 1888. Now, Whitman served in Civil War hospitals, and he saw lots of really horrible things. But even after that, he was hopeful. He was hopeful. What he did not like was what was called the Gilded Age in America, right? The Gilded Age in America is a lot like what we have now, right? It was commercialized, there were a lot of rich people, and, he said something, I can't remember what it was, but there was something like scum, right? There's scum at the top, okay? But we might have that now, okay? And back to Haga thinks that we need a collective we, okay? And Whitman was trying to argue for a collective we. We do this, we do that. We as a seminar discussed this, that, and the other thing. It puts it all together, provided that we are all democratic. We all have a say, we are all respected, right? And that's what we have to watch out for. Because some people will presume to say we when you are not involved. But Whitman thought this collective we would be formed through the national literature. And now you have tremendous literary works written by African Americans to draw on. So there's some more philosophy in there, but what I want to thank you.
Yes.
What I want to do is to say, look, pragmatists like Richard Rorty, who wrote in the 20th century, they want to take knowledge out of hope. I want to put it back in. Okay, we do need to have knowledge when we talk about hope. But I want to also use contemporary psychologist Gabrielle Ottinger, who talks about contrasted things. So if we just have flights of imagination, as I suggested earlier, if you just imagine yourself as a pediatric nurse, or as a child psychologist, or as a person running a PR firm in Washington, D.C., you're not going to get there, right? You are unlikely to get there. What you need is to engage in contrasted thinking. And the contrasted thinking is, I want to be a pediatric nurse. What obstacles might I face? Okay, and you need to be alert and aware of those obstacles in order to overcome them, right? So that is the deal with contrastive thinking, that there are psychological experiments that show that people who engage in this are more likely to achieve their goals, but only those who engage in fantasy or only an imagination, right? So it's an imagination coupled with contrasting thinking. So if you want to go to a meeting about equality in funding public schools, figure out who's going to be raising objectives and why. Who's going to want that funding not to be equitable, and what kinds of excuses they're going to come up with. It will be very, very unlikely that they will say, we don't want equitable funding because we want to keep Black people low. Right? They're not going to play their racist hand. They're going to come up with some other excuses, right? They're going to come up with low scores. They think, of course, the scores are low. We're not getting equitable funding. So, there are ways around that. Let's do a pilot program and see how people do. Let's put a little bit more resources into it and see how people do. Anticipate the objections to your goal, the goal that you hope for, and find solutions. Okay. So I think I'll stop there, and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak with you today.
We have about 15 minutes for formal questions. And so Professor Burrows is here. Dr. Carnegie looks like she wants to jump in first, and then and Professor Burrows will be looking around the room. If you want, just make some motion to her so that she can bring it to you next.
I don't think I allowed professors to ask.
Well,
No, go ahead. I'm just
okay. Well, you talked about politics. And as a political scientist, I was quite surprised that you didn't bring up Barack Obama's 2008 campaign and his landslide victory after he ran the campaign of hope and his now iconic campaign post that got hope as a slogan, a message that resonated well beyond the United States and earned Nobel Peace Prize as well. I just, wanted to hear you, reflect on, you reflected on Trump, but I wanted you to reflect on Barack Obama
Yeah.
campaign and presidency with regard to hope.
Right, yeah, thank you. I think if I had continued a little bit, I would have mentioned Obama. Because I was in there that Obama was a community organizer who did in fact bring hope into his presidential campaign. But I don't comment on it too much, although he is regarded as in the pragmatist tradition. Because I don't think his presidency bore that out. I mean, I think in terms of offering hope, it fell short.
Yeah.
I mean, it fell way short, and that to me is a liability in terms of any other candidates. Who is going to run on sort of this hope platform, the Yes We Can Hope platform? And to my mind, and this is my personal opinion, he wasn't enough of a street fighter for me. I mean, you have to get down in there and really fight with some of those people who are going to block your agenda. And I don't think he did, but that's just my opinion. So for all of the things that he did for America, I remain disappointed, especially on the Promise of Hope campaign.
In times when you use hope.
Okay,
In times when you use hope, what do you do to kind of remind yourself that, there's still changes.
Well, yeah, I never really, I guess I never really lose hope, although sometimes I get pretty tired. And right now I have been for the past, since November, I've been involved in advocacy for the unhoused population in the town of London, which is Lawrence. And that has been very difficult. It's been because, we have a city commission who's just like terrible. But there was a primary yesterday, I cast an advanced ballot, and it looks like there's gonna be change. So every now and then I get pretty fed up, and I think I'm not gonna do this anymore. And then I just sort of step back and take a breather and think, okay, well, we're not done yet. So it's basically stepping back and giving myself a break. And part of it also is that if you go, let's say, like I go to the homeless encampments, and I have been there at several of them, and my heart is broken every time I go. I mean, you see people your age, young people, older people, addicted to fentanyl, addicted to methadone, methamphetamines rather, alcoholics, terrible stuff. And I think, we have to be able to help these people. And the services are just not there, but we have to take some pretty creative steps sometimes. So, again, as somebody said earlier this morning, maybe it was you, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Right.
We were talking about voting,
Bullying,
yes,
okay,
and the fact that not a lot of young people get into voting. So my question is kind of growing up and seeing not many, what's the word, role models. Again, we have mentioned words, but we don't really see faces in the political places. We don't really see our parents going out to vote. And then the things we do see, gang banging, but just the images that are present within the community. What advice would you offer? What type of solutions do you think could attack getting more students involved, especially because a lot of people aren't qualified, if that makes sense.
well, do you have people who want change?
Yes, but my middle school and my high school were high performing schools. So we didn't have a lot of money, but those type of conversations were held in there. But when I went to high school, I noticed that not a lot of middle school kids were having the same type of conversations I was having, even though we were in the same circumstances. I feel like the environment really influenced the mindset.
I think that is a wonderful point, that the environment influences mindset. And that's exactly the point that I have encountered with dealing with unhoused people. That they're in a terrible environment, and so that makes them give up hope. That makes them think that that's the only kind of thing that they're worthy of. And so the conversations have to be started by you. To clean things up. And get people who agree with you so that you can have a nucleus of people, so that you can have your community and your supporters. I work with a group of advocates, and we have basically no qualifications. We have one person who is qualified, but we are moved by the help, right? So you get people who are moved to help, and who look at the situation in this environment and say, this is just not good enough. Okay, this is not the environment that we deserve. And then we start changing the environment. Don't expect it to happen overnight. Right? If there's a mess, start cleaning it up. Start cleaning it up and see who comes to help, right? And then try to keep it clean. That's one thing, right? And there can be very simple things that people can contribute to. That's what I got to know.
You mentioned several times the importance of sort of stepping back to keep yourself renewed. I was just curious, what does that mean for you? And then why does it work?
Well, for me, what it means is that I work on my research every morning. Okay, I work on my research every morning because that energizes me. And most of the times, here's what's behind that. I mean, there's the joy of creativity, where there's a joy of doing something I love, but there is also this aspect that I can actually control this. This is something that is within my control, right? If I want to change this paragraph, I can go ahead and change it, right? And I see it happen. So doing something that you can control and that you see the result of your agency immediately, right? That works. Some people clean, they clean their house. Since I hate cleaning, I don't do that. But you know, it's something that you can do, you can see the effects, and then it sort of energizes you. Okay. Sometimes it's just taking a little rest, and I don't work in the evenings anymore, right? I used to, but now I just sort of do Netflix binges or read a novel or something like that. So I mean, it's getting plenty of relaxation, because the stuff that we do can really wear you down, right? It can really wear you down. So that's what it looks like for me. And sometimes I just meditate, I'm just so tired. Don't have to rule.
I loved the warriors and carers framework. And a side note, anything of this thing that's happening to music right now? I don't know, yeah, okay. Jason Aldean came out with this song called Try That in a Small Town. It has a lot of like racist dog whistles, other country singers like Jason Isbell kind of talked back to it and said, when I think about what happens in a small town and what we would be worried about, I think about the opioid crisis, and I think about, and those people like Jason Isbell, others actually doing organizing around, meeting those needs in the communities. But my question is, how do we change warriors into carers?
Yeah. Well, we have an easier question. I'm not sure. I mean, I think some of them might just be hopeless. I hate to say that, but I have a cousin who, I come from a very diverse family. Some of them are just out and out bigots, right? And some of them are sort of like liberals like me. And so, I asked my liberal cousin, speaking of bigots, how is our cousin Mike? Because he blames Obama for losing his job. But seriously, but, and there could be people of a certain age who you're not gonna change. You're not gonna change, it's the younger ones that I worry about, right? So how do you get those folks not to be worried? Well, maybe one way would be to say, well. You have, here's how I look at people like that, I think. You have two options, okay, in terms of some of the advocacy that I do, there are plenty of warriors, let's just say, you've got two options. One is you get on board with what we do. And the other is you stand aside, right? And you can carp all you want, but you do not obstruct, okay? So the minute they start to obstruct, I get. Do we allow bad words here?
Yes.
Okay, I get into lesbian bitch mode. And so you really don't want to deal with that. It's like straight people stand aside, you won't get hurt. But you gotta push back against the bad guys, right? But and that's not gonna change them. So I don't know what's gonna change them. Other than to try to show them what can be accomplished by caring, right? So, and some are just not gonna listen, they're not gonna listen, they're not gonna see, they're always gonna have a negative attitude. And for those folks, okay, they're just gonna have to be left alone. It's sad, but, it's gonna, you cannot let the naysayers get the better of you, right? You can't let them be right off the watch.
Hi, they don't usually give me this.
Uh-oh.
I asked this question kind of because, teaching English as a second and foreign language is a big part of my background, and I noticed some potential topics came up in the conversation about immigration and resources, and I was curious if you had a good way to really break through the what seems to me a false dichotomy of immigration and resources, that people are coming in, but there's not enough for everyone, basically.
I think what you do is you look at the facts. And the facts show that there are jobs that immigrants will take that other ones will take, right? So there's not a great resources. So part of dealing with warriors too, is that, there's a whole set of facts that they ignore. And the problem then becomes epistemological, right? It becomes that they don't want to believe this, right? And I'm not sure how to deal with it, other than to say, look, here are the facts of the matter, we don't see immigrants draining resources, they can't get on welfare, right? They're taking jobs that people won't take. So, when we look at the facts, the problem isn't nearly as bad as you think. If there is a problem. So that's the only answer I have.
So you talked about the goal directedness and the role of imagination and hope, and just like seeing that we have in our country just so many competing visions of where we're going and what we're doing, like whose task is it to help create a kind of shared imagination? Like we're not reading common books. Like is it storytellers, is it the arts, whose role, whose task is that?
I think it's everybody who's concerned. Right, everybody who is concerned needs to start coming together and creating shared visions. So, you're kind of in a Templeton family, right? So that they're very interested right now in how to bridge divides. So I'm working on a project on Love My Neighbor, right? And how maybe love can help bridge divides. I've also been invited to participate in something about how empathy can help bridge divides. So that's part of bringing down the polarization, right? And part of it is like, doing what you're doing here. You're getting together in tables with different people every day and talking with people and finding out, hey, you're actually human, right? You're actually a person. And so this is something that I read in the New York Times yesterday about, again, my advocacy with the unhoused population. It's a model whereby, it's not the well-off serving food to the poor, to the unhoused. It's everybody sitting down together at a table and talking and eating and having dinner. And it's not, this is something that I came across with the Reverend Clarence Hill, when I was in Oklahoma, working in Oklahoma City, with their racial issues. There are lots of really terrible racial issues. And so, Clarence had this idea, let's have people come over to your house and something, right? Have people share a meal, that sort of thing. Get together with somebody that you wouldn't ordinarily get together with. And you find out, guess what? We're all humans, right? We're all people. We all have our hopes and dreams. We all have families, right? None of us was hatched in a bog, okay? That sort of thing. So you find out the commonalities, and it's everybody's responsibility to do that. And that still does not answer your question about a shared vision. It's a very complicated thing that's forged, but it's a step in the right direction. That once you forge commonalities, then maybe you can get to a shared vision. It's like, I want my kids to have a better education. Oh, so do I. How do we do this? That's the kind of thing that I think will start us in the right direction. But it's everybody's responsibility.
I wanted to draw attention, because I agree that that should be the way that everybody goes about things, just sitting down and actually having a conversation. But with the influence of the news, like social media, there's a certain level of trust, like if you see on the news, maybe somebody walk away, got killed by their neighbor.
Yep.
It kind of strains, I'm not comfortable having an open, relationship now. Back when I was little, they used to leave the doors open, because they had that trust. So how navigating through social media and a lot of the narratives that are being put out, what you would recommend trying to get your message out?
Yeah, creating community and forging bonds requires trust. You are absolutely right. And there are situations where you shouldn't be trustful of people. So you have to proceed with caution in all of this. So I'm not saying just open your door to anybody, right? And certainly when there are acts of violence that are perpetrated in the neighborhood, it really upsets people. It is a very upsetting thing. And it makes people skittish and scared. So it would take a while to restore trust in that kind of situation. And some situations remain dangerous, right? They do. So, this one of these unhoused encampments I work with, Sunday night, a guy beat somebody over the head with a lead pipe to the extent that part of his skull was showing. And he went to jail and was released on bond. And as of last night, he was back at the camp on the outside in the perimeter, sitting around and hopefully not getting alcohol, right? But this is the kind of situation where there is no trust in that camp. There is danger. And so before you can even talk about commonality of purpose, you've got to figure out how to remove dangerous elements and then how to restore trust in the community. None of that is easy. I do not have easy answers. I know that the one situation I'm talking about, that camp, which is run by the city, I think it should be dismantled. I don't think it's going to happen, but at least they need that the violent person sort of removed if they can. So this is the kind of thing I want.
Hello, I know we talked about how community is like an answer to hope on like the local, state, federal level, but like going back to that social media, as local citizens, how can we maintain hope when we are just inundated by so much bad news and so many drastic events? Because those are things that are outside of my scope of the individual. I can't control what happens in other countries, and it's not always acceptable to take action in a way that's meaningful, besides spreading information. So how can we maintain hope as local citizens when there's just so much that is out of our agency or our ability to act?
Well, that's a great question. And again, I don't have the answer to this. If I did, I would probably be in Harvard and not here. But or maybe even not Harvard, I don't know, maybe UN. I don't know about that, but it's tough. I mean, it's a tough one. I limit my consumption of news for that reason. And the news media, you have to understand it. The negativity grabs the headlines, right? It's the negative stuff that you hear about. There are lots of positive things that happen too, and it's good to bear that in mind. That, you know, we don't hear about all the positive things that are happening around the world. We do hear about plenty of negative things. And there are lots of things that you can't do, right? I can only hope that the people of Myanmar are not attacked by their government, right? I can only hope that the war in Ukraine. I don't have any agency to help with that. Maybe I could give some money to help people in Ukraine or in Myanmar. I don't know, but there is a movement called effective altruism. You know about standard stuff, right? I don't want to think about it. I mean, I'm still kind of up in the air, but you know, there's a guy named Peter Singer who was a utilitarian philosopher, who's sort of infamous for many things that are not so great. But he does have this movement that he has created called effective altruism. And what it does is it researches various organizations to find out how your money is used and where it can be best applied. So there's that. I mean, and some people live as effective altruists, meaning that they will take a lower, they will have a job and live in a sort of smaller apartment and give more of their money to other kinds of causes. But other than that, I'm fresh out of ideas. I don't know what to tell you, but the social media is not helpful. It is not helpful in many ways. And so I think people are learning that. And when they finally reach the point at which they are truly disgusted, they'll turn it off. And so I wrote about some younger students and high school students who are there, right? And they have flip phones. And they say, hey, you know, I'm good. I read now. I don't do this stuff. I don't surf the web. I'm sure we're too, but I'm still looking for my phone. But yeah, I mean, it's part of self-regulation, right? Just not taking it all in and not letting it overwhelm you, and sort of creating some boundaries, creating some balance.
So I'm cognizant of time. I think we have time for maybe one short question. And if no one wants to ask it, yes,
Oh,
good, Brent.
We have two short questions.
They'll be short, then we can keep them in, yes.
If one of these persons is a professor, it's not going to be short.
Sorry, Brett.
Going back to voting, we hear a lot of students and citizens say there are certain elections where I don't like either candidates. Like, let's say in 2024, we have Biden versus Trump, and a lot of people say, well, I can't vote for Trump, but I don't like Biden either. How do you motivate people to vote in that situation?
It's not, yeah, thank you for that brevity of your question. It's certainly, but it's a hard one. And I would say both of the lesser evil, right? And I think we're pretty clear with Biden. I mean, I know Biden is lesser evil. I was disappointed with Biden. I thought there were other better candidates and that we needed to change, but you know, Biden is not trying to destroy the United States or the government, and so to me, that's a plus. You know, so, you know, I guess that's what I would say.
Mine just goes, well, I wanted to ask, when it comes to self-regulating the amount of social media you consume, how do you make sure that you don't miss out on the importance? I know the news does tell a lot of bad things, but some of those things are local, so just in case, you know.
Can you subscribe to newspapers? Do you have newspaper subscriptions? Okay. You do?
I don't.
Okay, well, I do. I subscribe. I got the New York Times, and then I have a couple of old papers in Oklahoma and a couple of papers in Florida, so I live now. I scroll through the headlines. And I know there's a lot of interesting news items today in the New York Times, but I know you just have to pick and choose what's better, what's worse. Where do you get your news from?
If any, it'll be on AL.com, you know, something local, or if I'm using Bing, they'll have a lot of stuff that'll pop up.
Scroll, pick and choose, be selective, right? Okay, some things are more vital than other things, right? But you know, this, what was it that there's initials, it's missing out on something important. FOMO, thank you. FOMO stands for. Yeah, there you go. Thank you for bringing it out. Yeah, I don't have that. welcome to the letter, here I am. So, yeah, don't worry about that, don't worry about it, okay? Yeah, somebody else on you.
I've already had that idea, I just had a conversation with somebody about, if you give up that much, because I really don't have social media on my own. You'll miss out on big stuff, like I said, if a house on fire or something.
Yeah, you won't.
Somebody will.
Somebody will tell you, you'll free up time to do even better stuff, right? You won't be driving around all these silly social media things. Like, I mean, forgive me for this, if who really cares about Britney Spears? I mean, have I just offended people? I don't know, this is a big issue, right? Oh, Britney doesn't, Britney, like, oh, my God. I don't know, so I don't know, but another one.
Oh, no, I was gonna say, also remember that it's like social media spreads things just like wildfire, so you're gonna find out.
It's unvetted news, right? You know, and so I mean, I'm an old person, so I do Facebook, right? So, if you've got friends on Facebook, you just spread the most outrageous lie, it's not you, okay?
Of course
Looking forward to the answer snow. Michael listening. But, and then, I have a friend in this administrative report in March, she's like, no, this didn't happen, but I interviewed this woman, this didn't happen, this sort of thing, so you do have to watch it. So you might miss out on a couple of things, that somebody will tell you, and you can do even cooler stuff.